Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm not Lee White, but I am Will Terry. Lee White is on assignment. And all three of us are professional illustrators. We've all worked for all the major publishers in the business. Together, we publish somewhere around 75 children's books, and we've all taught illustration at university art programs.
That's right. And this week we have an interview. It's Brant Woods. Again, excusing Lee White, who's on assignment. He's wrapping up a few details on our latest pro level course called Self-Publishing Pro. That thing is open for enrollment right now. If you're hearing this the week this episode comes out, if you missed this, if you're late to enrollment, you can just go to selfpublishingpro.com and get on the waiting list for the next time that we do it. But this course is all about how to take this project idea that you have, or take these illustrative skills that you have and turn them into a book project or any sort of physical sort of product, something that you own, that you can control the entire development of, the printing of, the distribution of. And so we come at it from our experience between Will, me, and Lee of what we've done over the years, self-publishing our books. Lee did a tarot deck that was really successful. I've done pins and stickers, those things like that. And we just show you how to do it start to finish. We already got people signing up for the course, and we really want to have you there. So if you want to know more about it, go to selfpublishingpro.com, and that will answer any more questions that you have. But for today, Brant Woods. This guy is a muralist. He started out as a comic artist, and he sort of shifted into murals when he saw, it was one of those things where you see a need and you know the exact way to fill it. And what that need was, is he grew up in a small town, and a lot of people are wondering, how can I make it? Do I need to move to the big city to be a successful artist? And here he is thriving in a town with a population of 10,000 people, right? In the middle of nowhere. And I'm familiar with it because that's where my in-laws live, and that's how I got to know Brant. It was kind of through them. And what he's done is he's started making murals in this small town, starting with this project to essentially turn his Inktober challenge into a mural challenge. And it was, it started out as one mural, then two murals, and ended up being these 37 different murals done, transforming this small town. He's documented it on his social media platforms that he participates in. He's had a few of his reels go incredibly viral, 27 million views between one of them. And the one, we refer to it later, but essentially what he did was, while his wife was out of town, he redesigned their master bedroom and painted a mural on the wall, and just did something really, really nice for her. And she comes back and she's totally surprised and is crying and everything. It's a great little video. But lots to learn from this was a chock full of information kind of episode. What were some of your big takeaways, Will?
My biggest one is it goes to the heart of what I'm all about as far as being an artist and marketing yourself and making your career. He's not waiting for someone to hire him. In fact, he's swimming upstream against the resistance and he's basically creating his own job. I absolutely love that. I think more artists should do this sort of thing, is try to figure out where you can elbow your way into the world and make a career out of it, and not wait for someone to hire you. That's my big takeaway.
Yeah, really good stuff. So if you are curious about him, just do a Google search for Brant Woods. Go follow his social media, and take a look at what he's been creating. But with that, we're going to jump right into the interview. Well, thank you for joining us. This was sort of a long time. We've been working on this for a little bit. I remember, when was it? It was last year that we did the mural together.
Yeah, it was in January last year.
And so that was your whole plan, was to get on the podcast by inviting me to actually help you work on the mural.
I think that's your father-in-law's actual plan, because it was his building, and he was like, "This kid needs help. He lives in the middle of nowhere. He needs something else."
Yeah. So why don't you just set the stage for us? Here you are, Brant Woods, living in literally the middle of nowhere. And to give you an idea of this, Brant lives where my in-laws live. This is how I really got to know him. And he's been doing murals in this small town. And this small town is, if any of you have seen the movie Cars, like Radiator Springs is like a nicer version of Safford, Arizona.
But we're twice as big as Radiator Springs.
Twice as big. It's exactly like it, except the cars don't talk. So so why don't you tell us what you've been doing in this small town to kind of get your name out there as an artist?
So right before the pandemic, I moved back to my hometown. My wife and I were coming to just see my brother get married, and she put in for a job. We were doing travel nursing with her, and I was working on comics. Mm-hmm. And she put in an application, and they called her in an hour to be a prison nurse. And I was like, that's a red flag. You shouldn't. If they call you in an hour of putting in your application, something's wrong. But she took it, and she loves it, and I've just got stuck here. I didn't ever plan on moving back. Mm-hmm. And my friend, there had just been a mural. Can I share that mural real quick? Mm-hmm. A mural had just gone up in my town. See if I can pull it up. And my friend was like, "You should do one." And I told him, no way. Because the mural that they had up, here, I'll share it right here. Sorry for everybody that's listening. If you're just listening, this is, can you see that mural right there?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I've seen that mural.
Yeah, it's very much like what I would consider 60s or 70s oil painting. That kind of look to it. And he's like, you should do it. I'm like, that's not how my art looks at all in any way. I have no idea how I would make that. And there's nothing wrong with that mural, but it isn't how I would paint either way, because it's on Main Street and it's a picture of Main Street, and I don't get that. As in,
right.
Like the Main Street's right there, and it has the mountain in it, which a lot of mine do too, but it looks just like the mountain. I'm like, literally you could step 4 feet back and look over and see the mountain and Main Street, right. And I don't understand why we did that.
Right.
Well, I know why, because this is what Arizona art looks like most of the time. Right. And the reason I bring this up, I don't bring this up to like diss on it, but that's what kept me from thinking that I could do murals in Arizona or in this location, because that's what people wanted. And my friend was convinced. He's like, no, let's talk to the city or the county supervisor. So we met with him, and he was stoked. He was like, let's do some murals. I'm like, okay, fine. And so we did 30 mock-ups, just like quick mock-ups on different walls to present to different business owners. And
so wait, you went around the city or the town and found all the blank walls and said a mural could be here, a mural could be there.
Took a picture of it and like just kind of threw up quick sketches. And I don't suggest doing this, but I took a few other people's work and was just like, what about this? What about that? Just seeing what people liked.
Like a mood board.
Anything, yeah. I was just like, how do you feel about that? I wouldn't suggest that now. I was so dumb. I was just trying to get something to happen.
Wait, why wouldn't you suggest it now?
I don't want to get in trouble. I guess if you say this is a mood board, this is an idea, it's cool, but I worry about using other people's work now. The funny thing is I've seen other people do it with mine. I've literally had friends that do murals send pictures of mine, be like, we want this. And they're like, hey, your stuff's popping up in all of our mood boards. I think that's funny. But we went to like 30 different people, sometimes me, sometimes the county manager, whatever. And every one of them got turned down. And we were even saying the city will pay for it. Like, we couldn't give these murals away.
Wow.
At any point. And this was right in the middle of the pandemic, so it was like, could have been free exposure at a rough time for small town America. And nobody could catch the vision at all. And there was that one mural.
It's kind of like the Music Man, but you're the mural man. You come into this small town, and they're like, we don't need music. We don't want our kids running off and seeing art on walls.
Yeah. And the funny thing is I got in trouble at one point because my brother called it the brown streak, was Main Street because it was all just brown brick and stucco. And I repeated that at one point and kind of got in trouble. And one of the leaders was like, okay, change it then, as kind of like angry that I had said that. But so we all got turned down and I took a break. I went back to doing some comics and I came back. Well, I read this book. Will's going to love this. It's like a plug for his thing. I read this book. And
I'm so
funny.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Wait,
no, it's good.
For people listening, what book is that?
It's What They Don't Teach in Art School.
By Will Terry.
By Will Terry.
And now here's something, I got to say this. We didn't get you because of that.
Oh, no.
Can I just say this? Can I throw this out there?
Yeah.
I was flipping through TikToks or Instagram reels, and I would see your stuff come up, and then one day Jake is like, "Hey, I know that guy," and then you guys did your thing and all, and it was like, oh, it brought it home like you're local. I had no idea that you even knew who I was.
Well, and since we're gonna do the plug, let's just do the plug for SVS. I'm like what I consider SVS success story because I dropped out of college. And I've been with SVS since you guys did like the first three classes, like where you had to download the class, how to draw everything like that.
Wow.
That came out at the same time that I was really unhappy with my degree. And I had an opportunity.
Can you say where you went?
I went to EAC here and got a degree in psychology, like associates. And I was 1 year into ASU. And it came to this point where I was starting to draw, I was starting to take your classes. And then it was like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I had a job that I hated that was really, really rough. And I realized I didn't like the industry of social work and that kind of thing. And I was taking that class, was starting to draw my first children's book. And then it came like summertime and they're like, okay, $12,000 for the next semester. And I was like, I don't have that, nor do I want to pay it. And I'm like, for a degree I don't even want anymore. It was a long time coming. And so I actually got a job where I could work at home from a friend who had like a Etsy business that I could run for him from my house. And I was like, I'm gonna do this. And my wife's like, cool, just make sure you cook dinner every night, and then that'll work. And so I just started doing that, and then we had a kid, and it worked even better for us at the time because she was working full time, and I was doing that thing from home with the kids. So I'm very slow. I should probably be about 4 years further into my art than I am because I think it's like 7 years of working on this, 7 or 8. But I appreciate SVS, and if anybody's like thinking about it, if they're listening to this podcast and thinking about it, I think that I would not have half the skills that I have art-wise if I hadn't taken those fundamental classes.
Dude,
the
awesome.
the thumbnailing and all that, take them, try them. It's so good. So, okay, plug time over.
Thank you.
So there was one thing that happened at the same time I was reading Will's book. The last person that turned me down was a music store, and it was like run down, beat up, and I had taken them like a design to do on the front of their building because they had moved over. It had been condemned, and I was like, let's paint the front to make it look nice, and they're like, no, we're gonna use the insurance money to do the front. And I remember looking over at an employee while the owner's telling me this, and they're shaking their head like, that's never gonna happen. But I was just like, okay, whatever. That was like the nail in the coffin. I'm like, I'm done. And then I read that book, and it's funny is I thought there was like a whole paragraph. I just went back and looked, and it was just a listicle that you had of like possible things you can do to make money, because that's what was bugging me. I felt like my art was getting good. I had done comics for 3 or 4 years. I ran a comic strip and I had a successful Kickstarter, but a failed Patreon that came and kind of was like, okay, this isn't working either. And I just wanted to make money at that point. I was at that point where it's like, I need this to make something to bring home. And when I read that thing, just murals was a possibility, it kind of popped back in my head. I got angry. And because I had that whole experience where everyone turned it down. And then I thought, okay, I had avoided doing desert type art. I'd always hated that growing up. I'd always liked video games or anything other than desert stuff, because that was like where you never like what you have, Right. So I didn't. And I remember laying down and thinking, hey, and this is a crazy thought, but it was like, hey, if you take a guitar and you put 2 extra arms on it, you could technically make it look like a saguaro. And I always grew up loving music, and so let me see if I can pull up.
People don't know what a saguaro is. It's those.
Yeah.
It's the iconic desert cactus with the two arms.
If you think of the yes. So I'll just pull it. I'll just show it on my iPad because it'll be faster than trying to screen grab it. But I basically came up with this design right here. And so I came up with that design. I like wrote it down. I started to fall asleep. I was like, I need to write this down. And I woke up the next morning and just started sketching it out the whole day. Like, I think I had a bunch of stuff to do and I just kind of like bailed on everything and was working on it. And then I sent it to my lawyer friend. I'm like, hey, this doesn't look anything like what people want, but it does have the desert thing. So it's more of like my Rage Against the Machine of like, okay, if I have to do desert art, I'm going to make it look the way I want with the colors, like an updated palette, updated colors. And I took it, here's the funny part, here's like the punchline. I took it back to that music shop and his son was there, the guy of the owner. And I was like, hey, the owner, I met with him like a year ago and he said, you could do whatever you want out in the alleyway. Cause this isn't the front, but this is the alleyway. And on the way out, he had said, you know, you could do whatever you want out there cause it's like unpainted, whatever. Yeah. And the son goes, no, I own this building. My dad works for me. And I realized that somebody shut me down that wasn't even in charge of the building. He's like, my mom owns the building and I own the business. My dad just works for me. We like bought him out years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got shut down by somebody who didn't even make decisions for this. So that was crazy. But he was like, okay, we don't have the money because we just renovated this new space, but you can do that if you want. So I went to the city and asked for paint. And I happened to have a friend that was an electrician that had a bucket truck and I just did it. You know, I was like, okay, let's just see if I like this because I don't. And that makes a lot of muralists that are professionals mad because they say, don't design without a contract. Don't do this you need to get paid and stuff. But I had never done it. And I'm like, I just want the experience. I just want to see if I can do it first.
It's like that with starting in any market in art.
I think
even
so.
School visits. There's the authors that get mad if you give away a free school visit because you're trying to get your foot in the door.
100%.
I think you should do what's good for you. Be self-interested. It's your career. You've got to do what you've got to do.
Well, experience for me was way more important than money at that moment.
Right.
And so that's my biggest tip for anybody that like wants to do a mural or tri-mural. Find a really ugly wall that maybe isn't even painted, and then the worst case scenario is you say, hey, if you hate it, we can paint over it, but you get a free coat of paint, you know, if you let me try to do this thing. It's a win-win for anybody that's a building owner, business owner. But that's another tip. You need to make sure that the building owner and the business owner both like it. That's usually a big thing. Like, they're not always the same person. A lot of times they're not.
Right.
So, yeah, so I did that one, and then it led to another one. Sorry, go ahead.
I wasn't going to say anything. I want to hear what happened next.
Okay. So then a boutique opened 1 block down the road on Main Street, and they wanted to do like they had several squares that we eventually filled up, but they had one big square that was 10 by 10, and they're like, we want some kind of selfie thing so that when people buy, you know, a shirt or a bag or whatever, it was very like Southwestern boutique. When we buy that, we want them to go out and take a picture with it. And it said like made in the Gila Valley, which is our area. And so I made that one for them. And at that point, I guess I should back up. I've done Inktober like 7 times. But my Inktober's always get out of control every single time. Like I've done children's, like the very first one I ever did was like this book. And I drew it with my finger on my iPad the very first time. And then I did I did another one where it was like another whole comic book like in the better part of 30 days with a little extra. But they always get out of control, and it's funny, it got to the point where my wife, she would see it was August and she's like, don't even say it. I'm like, I'm getting ready for Inktober again. And it just always got out of control. My plan for this Inktober, which was like 3-4 years ago, was, hey, I've gotten these murals. I don't want to take over all these big walls that we have. Let me just do all of like, when there's 2 walls or 2 ceilings or 2 roofs, when there's 2 roofs on Main Street, there's a tiny wall higher up. There's like all these different roofs, and there's all these small walls on the upper sides of Main Street. Let me just do little pops of color. So I could just go up there, roll some paint, do a little roadrunner or a cardinal or something, or a little cactus, and then we would have all these small bits up and down Main Street that wouldn't mess with anyone's facade or side of the wall. And I pitched it as like a tourist thing. Hey, we'll have all this color. People want to walk the street. And Downtown Association loved that. They'd already liked the 2 murals that I had done. And they're like, okay, but we highly doubt you're going to get it in a month. And I love that version of myself that thought I could do it in a month. That's so crazy. But what happened was I started taking business owners out because I was like, hey, you have this upper wall. Can I paint something on it? Like, what are you talking about? I would take them out in the street, point at it, and they're like, oh, I didn't even know I had that wall. I was like, cool, this is what I was thinking. I like had, a little mock-up, and they're like, yeah, no. And it was so weird. This happened over and over and over that people are like, no. And I'm like, you didn't even know that wall existed 30 seconds ago. And now you care if there's something on it, and most of them are unpainted.
This is like an exploration of human psychology too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like they realized they could have control over something, and they were just like, and they just said no. So the funny thing is, there's probably 4 or 5 of those out of the 31 that are upper walls, which I was trying to do all of them like that. And for some reason, people like got it with the lower walls, but they were 10 times, 20 times bigger. Like some of them are 100 feet by 20 feet. And so those were way easier. I could have never guessed that would be the case. I guess that's just where people expected murals to go at that point. So the project just exploded by like 100 times the scale. So it took me like 3 years. And the county supervisor, every time we would get up and like announce new murals or get an award or whatever, he's like, yeah, how many days are you on? I'm like, shut up. I'm sorry it's taking so long, but it's way cooler than I ever expected it to be.
Right.
And so I think if you look over here, let me see if I can turn my camera real quick. Right there, there's basically where I was like marking them all off. And it ended up with like, go ahead.
Anyway. I'm just for people listening. He just has a list of sort of like these hexagonal blocks that he's filled in with the murals that he's done. There's 31 plus of them, or is there 31 there exactly?
37 total. I had and I had like 6. I had about 6 other ladies come in and like collaborate with different ones for mural events that we ran with the community and other things. So there's 31 from me, 6 extra from these other local ladies, and a few from out of state. Your son, Jake's son, even came and painted one for a muralist that couldn't come. So yeah, it's fun. But now there's just murals everywhere up and down Main Street, like almost 40.
You really have transformed that town, which was, again, it's like the Music Man, like this stuffy little, hole in the wall town. Didn't want any change, and you come along and said this town needs color, let's do it, and it's great. There's people who will actually drive around and do like the mural, like the mural drive or whatever it's called.
I created a QR code that we need to make signs for, but basically you can scan it and it takes you to Gmaps, and you can it will run you through the whole gauntlet in like 5 minutes in your car or like 15 minutes on foot, and it's within 4 blocks of each other. Like I had one of the muralists I had come down from Utah to do one, came around the corner and she went, they're everywhere. What in the world is this? Like you could just see them up and down and around. And she's like, I had no idea they were all within 3 blocks of each other. She couldn't figure out how I had swindled my town into getting them all in the same area.
Yeah.
But I had pitched it a long time ago that it would be a mural walk, like tourist attraction. And I think artists might be a little allergic to words like tourism and foot traffic, but that's what city officials love to hear. Like those are the magic, like clickbait words they want you to tell them. So, yeah.
So did this? So far, it just sounds like a massive project. Did this turn into a business?
Yes, but I'm trying. would have made a lot more money if I hadn't had to keep, the lift was so expensive to transport, even if it was 2 miles up the road. They were like 150 to deliver, 150 to take back.
Tell people what a lift is.
So like a scissor lift, which is like a box that can go straight up and down. And so you can get 20 feet in the air and keep all your supplies on you and everything. I got basically delayed on the last 2 or 3 for like a long time. And I just was like, well, I too optimistic. I was waiting for the yes. And eventually, the last one that really took a while, I won't say who it is, but their board basically said, hey, let him finish. Yeah, the last one was supposed to be 3 walls that came together as one big one. And we only ended up doing 2 of the 3 walls. They look like stair steps. There's a wall, then there's like 12 feet back, and there's another wall. So it still looks awesome, but I had to wait forever to do that one. And I'm glad because it's my favorite one of all of them, but I spent a lot of money on the lift and stuff. And again, the money that I got originally from several sponsors had run out for a while. So I went and did some jobs to bring money back into this project. So this project didn't make me money, but I guess I could show you this. I put this here for a reason. This project right here is...
And he's holding up a piece of paper here.
It's got
newspaper.
Newspaper. It's got Justin Gaethje, who's like a famous UFC fighter.
Yeah.
He's from my town.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they're actually paying me to do this gigantic one now. I'm making more money off of that one than I made the entire time off of off of all of the murals that I did before. So this one project has gotten more sponsors and people excited about that. And then there's a Pepsi bottling company, and I think I could show a little bit of it because they just agreed to it. Oh, I don't think I have okay. So again, I feel bad for everybody, but this is like, they had a completely brown stucco wall, and we're going to do something like with almost neon icons and red and blue to match the Pepsi like feel. And that one itself is also like 5 figures. And so this year I'm going to make more in 2 projects that I've ever made before. And if I didn't have a baby at home, I'd be done in a month and a half. But since we've got the baby and my wife works full time, it's gonna be like a little bit more strung out than it normally would. So,
so let me just make sure I got this timeline right. It starts 2 years ago with the first mural. 3 years ago with the first mural. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so that first mural was essentially you like begging, like essentially getting thrown a little scrap that says, yeah, you could do it for free.
Because it's in an alleyway that nobody wants.
Because it's in an alleyway and nobody's going to see it. You essentially pay for it through you're just putting in your own time, but you get the city to pay for the paint, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So mural number 1.
And I should say that afterward, the owner was so happy he gave me $300, but that's the only time that's ever happened. That hasn't happened since.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Yeah.
So mural number 1 essentially done for free. You did get $300, but you also got the city to pay for the paint. Yeah. Murals 2 through 31, were those all kind of the same thing where it's like, hey, I'm going to do this for you as a service to the community. I've got a sponsor, like Home Depot's going to sponsor and pay for the paint. The city's going to cover the whatever other expense. Is that essentially how those murals worked?
Yeah, and it was a little easier because this was like post COVID, like not like a year and a half after COVID. And so asking business owners for money, especially in a small town, was like really rough. Unless they were like, there was a gym that was a high profile gym that was getting built. They had the money. They didn't even question it. That was awesome. I took it that money and ran when I did murals for them. But that wasn't on Main Street. That wasn't this project. So all the money I've made is off other projects from the exposure of this one.
Okay, so I'm sorry the pun, but I'm trying to paint a picture here of everything. So you're doing these murals for free. Now at the same time, we haven't got into this yet. You start your TikTok and your Instagram reels sharing what you're doing, and essentially this is like great content for the social media like beast that needs to be fed, right? People love seeing. I mean, it sort of sets up itself for the perfect story. Here's a blank wall. I'm an artist. Here's the finished wall. And people are like dying to see what the finished thing is going to be. They love.
And you have to come up with some kind of hook or title or something that makes people stick around for 40 seconds.
We'll get into social media later, but I just want to go down this thread. So essentially, these free murals were advertising for you as a muralist, and now you're starting to get other businesses that are like, oh, we really like what you did there. Come to our gym. Come do our Pepsi factory sidewall. Come do.
Yeah.
How did the MMA fighter wall come about?
So that one is the building and business owner who owns that 3-story wall. He wanted to do it, and he kind of reached out to several other business owners that he knew were sports fans. And he's like, hey, we want to do this tribute. He's definitely the most famous person to come out of our town. And
the MMA fighter, what's his name again?
The MMA fighter, Justin Gagey.
Justin Gagey, yeah.
He's big too. He's so
big.
Yeah.
Yeah. The new, he's going to fight in April for the UFC 300, which is the biggest event they've had. Yeah. So, and his nickname is called the Highlight. So that's why it's across the top, the name, but he's huge. And people here adore him. When they put that out on the internet, somebody comments that, oh, this is going to be an eyesore. And they got ganged up on by 50 people. And I was like, I didn't say anything. I just sit back and I don't have to say anything. The whole community's taking care of that one for me. So, yeah, he's very loved.
Right. So you got that mural. Now, as far as the bringing in the other artists to come from out of town or from in town to work on those, what was the how'd you convince them to be a part of this mural project?
So that boutique one is where it started, and I did I think, do I have a picture of it? I don't think I put a picture up. They had 8 or 9 squares that were 10 by 10 on their wall. They had this really long wall, and we had done the first one that was number 2. And one of the owners was like, you can do kind of whatever you want. We like your designs, but I need one that says babes support babes. And I was like, cool, but it's really weird if you pay me to do a mural that says babes support babes. So I was like, we need to find a female artist to come in and do that one. And I knew of a girl who had lived here, who had grown up here and had moved to the Valley. That was a graphic designer. I was like, hey, do you want to do this? I know you're good at Southwestern looking stuff. Can you do babes support babes with the cactus and kind of some other things they wanted in the design? And she said yes. And then we did it. I was like, hey, there's these 4 other squares I gotta get done. Let's get the whole community in. And what I basically did is designed them ahead of time, sketched them, painted the background, sketched them on, and then we just did paint by numbers with the community as high up as they could reach without too many ladders and stuff. And then I went back and promised I would clean it up. But we had her paint hers at the same time as this community mural event and tried to get everybody stoked about the murals. And it was cool because it went from 2 on that wall to 7 on that wall in 2 days. But
that's really cool.
That happened with her. That was what sparked us. Oh, we can do a collaboration. I'll prep the wall. I'll just have you come in and sketch with my projector because you already designed it. Sketch it on and then paint it during the event. And then this whole project got drawn out for so long that I eventually went and begged another building owner that was on Main Street that had a very similar building with 9 walls. I was like, hey, can I do one more community mural event? I'll be done. This will finish it off and then plus some. And I had gained more friends that were artists at that point, and I convinced 2 muralists from California to just design me a square, save me some time. We brought in Miles, your son, to do one, and then the other one we did the community. And then I pulled 2 local ones and 1 from Utah and just said, come paint on this weekend. We're going to have the whole community come out again. And that basically, that's another reason I didn't make a ton of money from this project is I put 3 months into prepping, designing, logistics, getting the paint, everything. I put everything into that because I was like, I'll just be done. It'll have 9 done in 3 weeks. And but that's where all these collaborations came from. It was more of just like, hey, this will speed it up. I
Right.
won't make as much money, but I'll be done faster. And I just put all the sponsorship money for both those events into those collaborations, helping other artists paying it forward, basically.
Right. Okay, so you've done the collaborations. You've done the murals for essentially for experience and for somewhat notoriety or exposure. When did it turn into an actual like business for you? Was it as soon as you got that first like paying gig for something outside of Main Street, where you're like, okay, I'm gonna start looking, I'm gonna start reaching out and seeing who else I can get paid to do this?
So-
Were people coming to you? How did that work out? And would you say it is a business, or it's more like a side gig, a side hustle?
I would definitely call it a business now. It's just a slow progression. But I'll give you the clue on how I could have, if I hadn't committed myself to these 31, I could have turned into a business like 2 years ago. And I'll tell you how most people do it. But for me, I had a farmer reach out to me, because we have, our two industries are the mine and farming. That's like what we have here. A farmer reached out to me. He's like, hey, I'm building a gym next to my house, like a basketball gym. I want you to do a wall. But then he said I had 48 hours because they were going to lay the flooring in, and he had to get all the scaffolding out of there. So I stayed up for 48 hours. I don't suggest that.
Oh,
but
wow.
I was like, here's this. We had a week to design and then like 48 hours to paint it. And I kept it fairly simple, but it was still like a ton of work because it's a whole basketball gym's length and height. But I did that, and I was like, I just got $2,000, bam, in like a week. I was like, oh, this is a lot of money out of nowhere, especially for me after all this time. And so I started to go, okay, there's something here if I can start landing more of these gigs. And like a new gym opened up, and I was painting one painting for them, and they're like, hey, what about that wall? And then I was like, okay, cool. But again, they said the same thing. We're getting the flooring in, so this has got to be done by the end of the week. And so I had to stop the mural I was working on, go design one, paint the upper wall, and then come back and do that. But I doubled down. Once you start doing it, people start going, oh, what about this wall? Oh, what about that wall? But so all of mine up to this point has been word of mouth. But that's kind of how this community is. I think it'd be hard to get into here without that. But
Get into
there's also like a small
small
town without.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's not as much money as like a city. Like you could land one big gig with the city and it could pay a year's worth of my work. Just depend. But there's more red tape. Like if you get with a corporation or a big business, you'll get paid more, but there's more red tape and more like hoops you got to go through. Where a small business, you need like one person to say yes or two, but it's going to pay you less. So that's like the trade-off that you have there. The way that I could have turned it around, I could turn around at any moment, but now that I have like an infant at home and my wife's working 4 days a week, I'm like cool with just working on the two big ones that I have currently. If you want to turn around now, I know two duos from two sets of girls or ladies that do it from California. One makes $150,000 a year, and they're like 2 years into it. And there's another set that's been doing it for about 6 years or 7 years, and they made $700,000 in 1 year, like 2022. And you have to split it, and then half of each of their money goes to the taxes because they live in California. So that's probably just like an okay income. But I feel bad. I'm like, there's so much work, but they travel, they get to do all that. The key to both of them is cold emailing, and they claim 100 a week, and I'm like, okay, that's crazy. But when you know that, if I just send out 100 a week, I'm going to get two of those eventually to trickle down to a $10,000, $20,000 jobs, and you only need a few of those a year. But they get tons. But that's if I want to turn into a really big business and I had a babysitter, I could just start cold emailing, and that's the way that most people do it. They're also the same people that say don't work without a contract. And I think at this point that might be the way I would do it, is like you get a non-refundable deposit so that you can go and design it. You get paid for the design work, and then they take it or leave it. And if it doesn't work, you just cut it and you get paid for the design. And that's how I would do it now. But when you try and get your first one, I would say especially in my small town, people couldn't see it until I did the mock-up.
Right.
And I even tell people now, this is the cardinal sin. People get really mad when I say this. Do a 15-minute mock-up or call it an ugly mock-up. Or in our case, we call it a thumbnail, basically, with rough color and rough that, and just say, hey, do you like this vibe? You could do 3 or 4 of those in an hour, and then you say, which one of these is this what you're thinking of? Are you interested in this? That's a much faster way to get over that hump and not feel like you spent days designing something, And when you're starting out, I think that's a better way to do it, but it makes a lot of people mad when I say to do that. But if you don't have a huge, if you don't have a huge portfolio, especially of murals, some people think you get away with just doing mock-ups on photographs of walls, and maybe if you're James Jean, you can do that. But I don't necessarily feel like I could do that at the beginning.
Right. So, and then as far as figuring out like pricing for these, is it per square foot?
Can I square I'll share my screen, and I'll also read it for those who are just listening. But
while you're looking for that, I'll just say I really got a kick out of when you gathered the community and were sharing those videos on social media. I thought that was really cool. Like, and I was thinking, this guy has so much energy for this.
Well, and that actually, I'll tell you, I just thought about something. I always forget I do this. When I did that one with the community the first time, I immediately got 4 jobs with local schools, like within the next year, where they're like, hey, come do that. So I prep the wall, I get it all sketched out, and with the projector, and people get mad about the projector that aren't artists, but it's like, I designed it for 20 hours in my studio, or 40 hours sometimes. I'm not going to go try to sketch it out on the wall.
Right.
I already did that. So I'm just going to project it and make it perfect. Plus, business owners love it when you're like, it will look exactly like this. Nothing will change. There's no risk there.
So who gives you pushback on that?
People online, I would usually guess it was non-artists.
Oh.
Because I'm like, you want me to
that's
spend more
cheating.
time?
You're tracing your drawing.
You get that all the time. Yeah, I'm like, I'm tracing my own drawing. Give me a break. Yeah, it's not. If it was like somebody else's. I
just really quick side tangent here, just to speak to that, because I'm sure there's some people who are like, well, yeah, how do you actually make a mural? And this podcast is, how to do it, how to make a living at it, how to make an impact in the world with your art. And you've really covered how to make an impact in your community, how to make a living at it. You've told us how to solve that money problem. Businesses will pay for, something that gets foot traffic, or that just makes the experience nicer. But how to do it is essentially you get the dimensions, you design it in Photoshop or Procreate or whatever, and then you use a projector to project it on the wall, trace it with a big rough pencil. And then you've got the line art.
I've actually started doing the painting, but yes. Yeah, I started to do it with the paintbrush this year, yeah.
Okay, paintbrush, whatever. You get it on there. And then you turn off the projector, and now you essentially know, based on sheets of paper that you have for reference, what color goes where, and it's just paint by number, right?
Yes. And I'm going to, after I show this pricing guide, I'd love to show you some artists that do murals. And I feel bad for everybody that can't see. I loved SVS on YouTube, so I would suggest everyone go check that out there. But I want to show some artists because I think some people go, oh, my art would never work on a mural. And I've got some people that do really well that I think would surprise some people on what they do. But pricing guide, I'll read this out for people who can't see. It's height of the wall, width of the wall, height times width, times price per square foot. And that's the tricky one, is trying to figure out their price per square foot. It needs, in a lot of ways, if you've ever heard of how people do paintings in the fine art world, it's like price per square foot or inch or centimeter.
Yeah, square inch, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the same idea here. But that price per square foot needs to include your labor, so your time, your paint, your supplies, and your insurance. And if you think about Amazon, where you're like, the reason why Amazon does really well is they don't tell you shipping. It's kind of like in there. They want you to pay for Prime so shipping's free. If you just start hitting people with, oh, I need this much for the paint, I need this much for supplies, I need this much for all that, people get worried. You need to give them one number that's like, this is it. The only thing I would add to that you need to, that's additional to that number, is if you're going to travel, you need a place to stay. And the reason I put these separately is like the city can come in or the client can come in and offer these things if it's easier for them. I had a mayor in South or West Virginia say, oh, I've got an Airbnb in my basement that you could stay in. So that's why I didn't add it too. But lodging, travel, and lifts. Sometimes the city will just offer a lift to you, depending on how connected that person is. So the three things that aren't in that equation are lodging, travel, and lifts to do that. But otherwise, it's height, width, and square foot. And here's a big tip: if you're sitting there looking at a wall or talking to somebody, and they say, "What does it cost?" You need to make sure you know exactly what they want, design-wise, exactly what the texture of the wall is. Like stucco, which is big in Arizona, is a nightmare, and it sucks up paint like crazy. I hate painting on, like the one that Jake and I did together was all like the heaviest stucco I've ever seen. We were just
horrible.
ramming brushes into the wall to try to fill it. And so you need to plan accordingly. Like I did the background with the spray gun so that it would be faster, but the actual detail of that was pretty rough. So you need to
for dry brushing, I'll bet.
You could do some dry brush stuff on that, but so there's a lot of things to consider, but you need to understand the scope before you give a number, because if you give a number and then you realize, oh, it's on stucco, or this is gonna take way more paint or whatever, you give somebody a number, then you're like, oh, but the lift, now you've just added $1,000 to, a thing. But that's why I put those additional costs aside, lodging, travel, lifts, so if the client or the city wants to go out and have people give those, it doesn't mess with your number, the overall cost of it. Keeps those separate.
Smart.
But is there like a base get out of bed price? Like it starts at 5,000, and then
that's a great
we'll add on top of that height and width. So
I know some people that do really well just doing Airbnbs because they want that like cool look for their for their app. When you scroll through for their reviews, they have these cool bedrooms. There's a certain price at some point where it doesn't make sense to do it. A lot of people are like, hey, would you do a bedroom wall? I'm like, yeah, but it starts at $3,000 or $5,000, because when you're working digitally, designing it can be 10 to 20 hours, whether it's a huge wall or a small wall. You're going to do almost the same amount unless you keep it really simple. And so to me, design-wise, it doesn't make sense to do something that's not at a certain level. So $3,000. I know some people are like $3,000's the minimum or $5,000's the minimum or whatever. Now with a baby, for me, it's like it needs to be hitting $10,000 unless it's local, because it just doesn't make sense for me to be gone for a week otherwise. For now, but if you want to travel and you're single, man, you could crush it. Like you could really go to town.
That's cool.
So if someone wanted you to come and do a 2 square feet painting in their bedroom, you're not interested in that.
I mean, if they say $5,000, I'll probably do it. But it's how much money you have to throw around. Somebody was asking me for a Spider-Man one for their kid, and I just typed up Etsy and looked up wall vinyl, and I was like, you'll get a better look there with just the wall vinyl, and it'll be $60, $70. So I found ways to kind of like push those off without offending anybody, because I don't want people to be like, Brent's a prick. Like we can't get him to come do any local stuff or stuff at our house. I tell people, $3,000 if it's local to start, but that depends. And I always put that depends on. But again, that's even dangerous. I'm giving people a number when I really shouldn't, where they could have a much bigger wall and think that, they're going to get this gigantic wall for $3,000. So just depends. But I definitely, if the listeners have ever thought about doing a mural, it is a good way to, even if you are, can I show some murals off that some people do? Can I do that? Okay. So I feel bad. I'll try to describe it for people who are listening, but I think when people initially think about murals, here's Daniel Speed. What his are basically like the spray paint neon portraits. I think a lot of people think about, they look at that and they get intimidated. They go, oh my gosh, I could never do that. He's what I would consider world class. He goes everywhere and does these UK, US, all that kind of stuff. Very cool. That's like what people think of. And it also, people get worried when they think I have to use spray paint to do this. And if I'm just going to say this so anybody knows, if you're going to do your first one, just go, and you're more of like a brush type person, go to Home Depot, get bare exterior premium paint. That's all you need. They've got every color, and it's not anything weird. And if you do the premium that's got primer and paint, it'll go on any wall. So if there's like an oil base, you'll be okay. It won't just start to flake off. So bare exterior premium, that's the paint you use. So let's go down here, and this is one of my favorite artists. She goes by The Obanoth, but her name's Hannah Webb, and she does fine art. The top here uses some of the, let's see if I can go down just a little bit. The top ones are more of her smaller canvas type one. She's more of a fine artist. But the lower ones here are her murals, and she's just found a way to basically, I've seen videos of her, she just uses a roller instead of a paintbrush, and she makes these gigantic ones. And she's so busy doing small canvases for high dollar that she's got, I think, like a 10 grand. I don't know if I should say that. I think it needs to be a higher number for her to come out. But her stuff, you know, if you're like, oh, I do fine art can be blown up to a big wall and look just as good, if not even cooler, because you're like, oh, wow, that looks so great. But again, we're doing SVS here, so let me show you some other like illustrator types. F dot here, for those who can't see, it's EFDOT, F dot. He started with like this upper style right here that you see that says Sunday kind of look. He started as like a calligrapher type, like he did big calligraphy on walls for businesses and signs, and then he moved into, just below that is this icon, simplified illustration style. And what he's doing on most of those is actually just paint markers, because they have that perfect circle line, like uniform line. And he started getting into that, and then you see him go even on the bottom one here, more of a abstract design type. And people have liked that so much that he's done shoes with Nike, and he's done Major League Baseball posters and cards with portraits of people. Like, people have really loved his stuff. But he started as just like somebody who was into type. And I think he's out of New York. He's also said he's gone to Mexico and done stuff too. Lisa Quine is one of my actually good friends, and she does it out of Cleveland. And she was also somebody who was all about typeface. Like, she does illustrations and stuff for people to do on like journals and planners and that kind of thing. And then she started doing bigger murals over in Cleveland, and people have loved it. The funny thing is, she's admitted that she makes her husband go up and do the high stuff because she hates being on the lifts, but she's made it work. And her style, you know, it's funny how cool things can get when you put it on such a big scale. I never thought that my art would work until I blew it up, and I was like, actually, that works. It looks really good at that size. But again, here's another one, JC Rivera. He does this kind of bear look. That's either a bear eating pizza or a bear with boxing gloves. And you would think, okay, he just does this for fun. No, JC, not to diss on him, but he has done stuff with the MLB. He's done stuff with lots of big brands, but he's all over Chicago, apparently. Like, there's pictures everywhere. And he has a very cartoony style, but people have liked it on walls, and he's big. I would say he's one of the bigger ones in the game. Here's another one I want to show, Mr. B Baby. This individual does pinata characters. And again, if you're thinking, oh, I only do children's books, or I only do that kind of illustration, Mr. B Baby has made it crazy. From what I can tell, from the look of it, this person has tons of work, and it's all pinata characters. I wouldn't have thought, if you just told me, oh, I just paint pinata characters, that you could make a living off that. But she's done it very well. Or this, I don't know how she identifies, so I don't want to misgender her, but this individual's done very well, and with something that would be, I would consider unconventional for that game, for that.
That's
and then
really nice.
And then here's a couple of mine, just so people get a feel for mine.
Yeah.
Mine's been kind of all over the place because I was just trying to make the city happy, and it's all got kind of a southwestern feel. but I've tried to update the colors and update the look to the traditional Southwestern type of thing. But again, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I just do children's books, or I do, just lettering and stuff, that stuff works. You just have to find a projector and put it on a wall, and you'll be surprised at how much people like it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I wanted to loop in now, like the social media aspect of it, and sort of your take on social media. Is it absolutely necessary for you to have social media to build a mural business, or is it just a matter of cold emails? Like, do people care?
Do people care?
While you're thinking, I feel like a lot of social media is people trying to get essentially validation from other artists. A lot of artists on social media just need validation from other artists. And sometimes that's all you need. But I don't know that pays the bills.
Well, that's one thing I've been thinking about is I think I did my marketing on social media wrong because I did mural tips. And I think this is actually where a lot of artists, this is my take, this is just me. I think a lot of artists market to other artists on social media. And I can't think of a worse demographic to market to. Because artists love art. Like, trust me, I've got art back here and that I love, but the demographic of non-artists is so much bigger. So if you could find a way to market to other people that aren't making art that are impressed by your art, I think you're going to sell way more. But I think we always go like, everyone's always like, become a professional, show the tips. I don't think that normal people care about mural tips. I don't. I actually don't. They want to see art or like get off my feed, like, and so I've been trying to think about that. I'm actually moving to more YouTube to make some like painting films and stuff is what I'm going with right now. And I'm like, how can I make this interesting for someone that doesn't do art? How can I make this entertaining or, something that they want to see? They don't care about what brush I'm using. They don't care about the paint I'm using. That's like for this podcast where we're trying to give tips to people that want to try it. I think that we need to find ways to market to non-people. The other part with social media is if you're going where it's hot and there's lots of growth, it's usually younger people who don't own a building, And so I think you've even hit me up before and be like, why aren't you on LinkedIn? I'm like, oh yeah, I should be on LinkedIn because that's like where business people are. That's where like people that, marketers are and stuff. So I need to go and take all these clips that I have and do things with them on LinkedIn. I really should. Now there are some hip brands like ThreadUp, which is like a big brand that's for repurposing clothes. Like it's like a big thrift shop. Yeah. They called me up because they typed in, this is one of the few times I've ever known that it happened. They typed in on Instagram, AZ Muralists, and I came up. And so they liked that. So maybe if you're wanting to work with more hip brands, one person that people should look up is Have a Nice Day is like her handle, but it's Steffi Lynn, STEFFILYNN. Steffi Lynn works with like Sephora, Dunkin' Donuts. She works with like huge brands. And I'm pretty sure her social media is like the driving factor behind them wanting her. Or at least I would guess. She could be doing all cold calling or cold emailing and I don't know. But her social media game is off the charts. She has a raving fan base and works with crazy brands. So there's definitely like a level. I think it's something that you could be used as a, hey, look at this, like a trying to win over a person. I also think it's great for it's more of a portfolio. If you cold email and they get excited and they go look at your email or your social media, oh, look at all the ones they've done. Look at the people they work with. You better believe that I'm going to be like, look, I'm working with Pepsi, like when I do their thing. Like, that's a big name. Love that. But is it 100% necessary if you're like, oh, social media isn't growing like it used to? It's not the end all be all. It definitely isn't. It hasn't stopped certain people from making a good living. The other problem with this, good.
I imagine you'd if you just had a website that just had, here's 30 murals that I've done, and you go to a business and say, hey, you reached out to me or I'm reaching out to you. Here's just an example of samples of my work. That's all they would need to see.
Here's the hard part about social or about social media, though. I don't want to lose this thought because it's like the important part is that murals do good on social media, but they are almost impossible to have one per week to post, let alone 3 times a week.
Right.
And so like it's like big risk, big reward. You could have one mural a month and it could be awesome and it flop, or you could do one mural and it could get huge, but the next week you're not going to have anything unless you do mural tips. And the thing I hate about social media is it feels like everybody's becoming a professional commentator. It's easier to comment on other stuff or give critiques on other stuff, and it can be fun. I see some people do it well, but the creators I love are ones that make stuff. And it is almost impossible to make stuff often enough to feed the algorithm now.
Right.
And so
here's so you have a viral reel that has how many views? How many millions of views?
I think 3 or 4. But there's one that hit like 24 million between the 3 platforms. Like
24 million views.
But that bedroom one, it's because my wife cried when she walked in because she didn't know I was going to do it.
But here's the thing.
I'm not going to make my wife cry every week either.
No. But listen, the reason that the formula for that one is your wife seeing what you did at the very first, and she's like crying and she's so impressed, and you're like, oh my gosh, what did he do? And then you show the lead up to it, and
it's a good hook.
So it tells a story, right? You got the hook at the beginning, and it's like the question answer. I don't see why you can't replicate that for every mural you do, and just say, hey, part of the deal for this is I need to film your reaction when you first see it, and then imagine a business owner, like, they're coming around the corner, their eyes are closed, they open it up, they're like, oh my gosh.
Except how can he control that when the business owner's like in and out all the time?
Well, I did one for a ring shop. And we kept the younger business owner. It was a mom and daughter. We kept the younger business owner out of it. And I filmed her reaction. And it was good, but it wasn't as emotional. And people literally in the comments were like, this is fake. This is set up. This is everything. Like I even put up like I put up plastic so she couldn't see it as she was walking in to give it as authentically as I could. And people were like, this is scripted. This is everything. So like, it doesn't always work, even if you do it right. And so, it's the other one that did really well that got like 2.5 million was the Pepsi plant here makes a soda that they don't make anywhere else called Doc Holiday. It's kind of I think it's a sweeter, smoother Dr. Pepper, but it's called Doc Holiday after like the famous, Southwestern guy from Tombstone.
I didn't know that. I'm gonna have to try that out next time I go.
Yeah, did you see it? So it's basically like I told people, you're never gonna believe what I did to my mural. That was like the hook, and I held up a putty knife, and then I go in and say, this is for a drink that Pepsi only makes in one location. It's like their most exclusive thing. So I kind of like, it is, I told the truth, but I kind of like expounded on it.
Yeah.
And then when I'm done with the mural, I basically take 3 hours and chip away at it. I just start beating it up, because what they wanted was it to look like it was there for 50 to 80 years. So I just started beating it up, throwing paint on it or throwing dirt on it while it's still wet, taking a brick to it, chopping it up. And people were like horrified. And then you step back and you're like, oh, other than the color being really vibrant, it looks like it's been there a really long time. Yeah. And here's how I know I did a good job. Somebody commented on it and said, my grandma has lived here her whole life, and we just drove past this last week, and she said, when do you think they're gonna paint over that? Like it had basically done the Mandela effect, I think it is, where something hasn't been there but you think it is. Yeah. And my old art teacher was like, I thought they took down a wall and found that. So I did good. Other than the color, amazing. You could tell it's too vibrant. Otherwise, you're like, it looks super old. I left certain parts out that looked like where a nail had been. It looked like a gunshot, and I thought that looked cool with the old Western feel to it. But I fought with they didn't fight, but we discussed with the client quite a bit about like the fonts, trying to figure out how to make it look that way. But those hooks I did at the beginning made it go really viral, and that worked really well. So I believe in the hook. I just wish I was better at it. I need to practice it more.
That's amazing. Okay, so social media is...
It's a tool, but it's not the end-all be-all.
Right. I got it. And I agree with you as far as like YouTube as being a future, like a good home for muralists or for...
I have grown to 30,000 on Facebook, 50,000 on Instagram, and then lost some when I switched from comics. But I got up to 50,000, 55, and then on TikTok, I think I almost got to 50,000. And each time I'll get to that like mark, and then there's that turn where the algorithm goes, it doesn't change other than I want more of this, and I can't put it out enough. And I tried the reposting thing that people are like, oh, repost your old work. I got so many comments like, I've already seen this bull before. I don't want to see this. I want to see new stuff. And I'm like, I'm working on it. Like it's so that did not work for me like I thought it would, the reposting. And I'm just like,
That's why I don't do it. I'm like, stupid.
Yeah, and people are like, well, then you need to do mural tips or you need to comment on other people's work. I'm like, I hate that stuff. I want to see work. I like creators that create. I don't like commenters. And so it's that whole like, how pure do you want to be with your stuff? And again, since at this point it doesn't move my business, I think that doing one cool video a month on YouTube is where I'm going to go. And then maybe chop that up and do some small stuff, maybe one reel per week, if I can make it work.
But I think if you lean in on, I'm a muralist and I solve this particular problem for this particular type of person, is maybe a better thing for the overall business than saying, teaching mural tips or, or going the artist route. And you brought up earlier, like if you're marketing to artists, it's like maybe the worst market for you to try to
the demographic
capture.
for outside of artists is so much bigger. What you're actually looking for is fans of art, I think.
Right, and that's why I shifted. Yeah, if you look and you see, I was doing these sketchbooks I'd come out with every year called these drawings books, and they were
right there.
Yeah, you got them. And they're, a red cover, and I knew who my audience was, and it was like, this is people who love sketchbooks, which are artists, are going to love flipping through these and seeing like all the process stuff. And what I saw was diminishing returns with each book that came out. Someone who got books 1 and 2 didn't necessarily need a third one. Someone who got, 4, were happy to have the fourth one and not really need 1 and 2, right? And so I shifted into, let's make these things geared more towards people who love art but not necessarily are artists. And so I stopped doing drawings books and I started doing the spaceships book. And then I came out with the robots book, and someday I'm going to do the creature book, right? And
spoiler alert, yeah.
Right.
I do it.
And so these are books that, like, if you love spaceships, if you love Star Wars, if you love any sort of like sci-fi stuff, you're going to be more drawn to a book like that than if
and
it was
that
just
demographic is huge. That's a big demographic. Yeah. So
I feel like we've covered everything that I wanted to talk about.
I had a question for him.
Go for it.
Logistical question, like, so you're like, you're messing with real estate. Are there any like guarantees that you'll come back and fix it if it starts peeling? Like, what if it starts peeling off, or what if it damages?
That's a good question. You got to have a really good, like, it doesn't happen at the beginning for most people, but you have to have a good contract. That's the word I'm looking for. So that you kind of have thing, like, people ask, how long is this going to last, especially in the Arizona sun? And I'm like, if it's on the south side where the sun is most of the time, it's going to definitely take more of a beating faster than like on a north facing wall, almost none. But Bear claims 8 to 10 years. So I tell people 8 to 10 years. I try to keep a file with
and Bear is
Bear Paint, which is from Home Depot. It's a brand of paint, sorry. And then I try to keep in my files basically a palette of this is this color, this is that color. So if there's a hailstorm and it's here, I'll probably go fix up little bits. But if something happens to a wall, it just depends. That is something that I haven't run into too much. If you do the right amount, if you do the right amount of prep work, clean the wall, get the right paint, you'll be okay. If you try to use like craft store paint, it's not going to last, and people are going to be asking you to come back and fix it immediately, after the first like few rainstorms or sunny days. So You need to put in your contract, what it costs to come fix it if there's a thing. But I tell people 8 to 10 years, and I'm 4 years in, hoping for 4 more years before I see anything really happen.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not in it long enough to really go, for sure, Bear knows what it's talking about in Arizona. I don't really know yet. But, okay, the other thing is that I don't think people think about. Can I put up one more thing real quick? I don't want to keep you guys forever, but I want to show this off. This is the steps, and you can screenshot this if you want, and I'll read about it to people who can't see, but feel free to steal this. Getting your first mural. You find an ugly wall that, if you put paint on it, it will be a win. That way it's very low bar of entry for the building owner or the business owner. Take a photo of the wall, draw up your, 2 is take a photo of the wall, 3, mock up digitally or draw digitally what you're thinking on that wall so they can then visualize it. That's the big one. Most people cannot visualize.
Nope, you're right.
It feels like a superpower because you realize I try to tell people what I'm seeing, and I've seen people that love art that aren't artists but love art look at me just like, I can't see it. I have no idea what you're talking about. And my wife has always said, it might be my fault, but my wife's like, don't describe it to me, just draw it. I don't want to hear it. Like, it's not, you can't, either she can't visualize it or I can't describe it, but it's one of the two. There's a disconnect. Then you can pitch it to the building owner or the business owner. Then you decide on a price, whether you're going to do it for free or whatever. This is your first one, right? This is a little different with the second one or third, but this is the first one. Decide on price. Then number 6 is go to City Hall and make sure that there's no laws or ordinances that you need to sign, forms that you need to sign, because every one of them is different. In Safford, people ask how I got so many in the same place. Safford's rule is if the building owner and business owner agree on it, and it's not explicit, you're good. And I joke that it's the Wild West out here.
Who gets to decide if it's explicit?
I don't know. I've never dabbled into that. So I don't know what that. I would imagine there'd be a thing. That's even why the Justin Gagey one that I did, I cut him off mid chest because I didn't want later some new mayor or some other county supervisor going, we don't want to see big nipples. Even though he fights like that doesn't
right
mean
at eye level.
see it. Yeah, right at the children take pictures and there's a giant nipple behind them, And so I cut it like right there on purpose just to be safe. And they're like, why aren't we seeing more of the belt? And I'm like, I'm just trying to make it, like timeless so that we don't ever have problems in the future. But the big thing is like my town's really easy. I joke that it's the Wild West. Like all I need is a building owner and a business owner to agree on something I want to do. And if the 3 of us agree, then we're good. But I know that my uncle, he is an entrepreneur and does stuff over in Flagstaff, and he's like, it's 18 months minimum to get anything done to a building or a business or whatever. Like construction is 18 months out, if not 2 to 2.5 years. So if you're going to do a thing, that's like so many hurdles I can't even, like half this project took that amount of time, right? And so, and I get it, like if you're in LA and there's all that graffiti and stuff, they want to keep a hamper on it. But then once you go, and streets department, that's the other thing I did not know before, streets department. If you're going to block off sidewalks, if you're going to have a lift to where you have to block off a certain amount of place so nobody walks under you for OSHA and stuff, you have to go sign some forms and you have to draw out where it is, when it is, why aren't you there during Monday through Friday, 8 to 5? I have to explain that for like the projection part of it. And you have to, it's not a big one, it's like 3-4 pages, but you have to make sure that so that the city goes, yeah, you're good. And whenever I've gotten called out, I just hold up paper now. It's not even the actual form. I just hold up paper and be like, I got papers, and people leave me alone. You don't even have to actually have the forms on you at a certain point, but they will call you on it. And I have had the cops called on me before. And then they're like, here's the number to dispatch. Please call them if you're gonna work at night so that we know it's you and not somebody else. And then the last step to this is, it's project your mural on the wall and then make as much noise in the local media as much as social media. So if you're in a small town especially, tell the paper you're going to be there. Let people know to come by and say hi, like you're friendly, it's fun, like do that kind of thing so that the community gets behind you on it. But that's the steps to getting that first mural. It's a little different later on. because you're not necessarily, later on it's a little different. Kind of what we talked about earlier. It's kind of the normal way to go about it. But
Right.
anyway, I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
That's
I like
great.
the practical tips, and maybe we end the podcast on that. Like practical tips to get started doing this. Essentially, is see a need, fill a need. To quote Robots the movie. I don't know if you guys ever saw the Robots movie, but and the other thing I kind of take away from this too, it's like, any art job that you want to do is going to be a grind in some way or another. And so just, you have to be sort of, you have to just accept a certain level of grind in the work that you're doing in order to be successful at it. There's no like easy one and done sort of situation where, I draw murals, I paint murals, and everybody wants them from me, and it's as easy as signing up and I go and do it. But
No,
there's steps that you got to follow. There's hoops you got to go through. There's all kinds of stuff.
Can I say something real quick? I'm going to roll up one more thing and then I'll get out of your hair. Because I thought about this yesterday and I want people to see it. Is you go, where does money come for these things? Where to get work? And again, I'm sorry for everybody who's listening. I'll try to read them off quickly, but you can come screen grab this or, screenshot this if you want. Oh, lost it there for a second. It's where to get work. There's a lot of different places that I don't think people think about that I have like stumbled upon. And again, you don't need an art agent for this. You could get one, and I know that some do, and they travel more because the art agent tries to get work where they can.
Yeah.
But art agents take what? How much do art agents take for your job usually? Like 30%, or is it more than
15 to 30,
30,
depending.
yeah.
15 to 30. Okay.
Well,
So you can get people that do that for you for free. The city is the big one. Chamber of Commerce, Tourism Department, Downtown Association, City Council. Those are 4 different places you can go in the city to talk to people. What I try to tell people is, if you can get the mayor, if the mayor happens to be somebody who like is a hobbyist in art, you almost have a golden ticket because he likes art but doesn't have time to do it. So by having somebody be engaged and excited for it, sweet, they'll champion you. And the county supervisor here is the one who was like down for it and excited about it. So he put me in front of council meetings that I would have never gotten into. He put me in front of downtown association meetings I would have never known even existed. And got people to be excited about it that are at the head of things. But you don't have to have the mayor. You don't have to have the county supervisor. It could be their secretary. You do it well enough and they go, oh, I saw your mural, I'm stoked about it. And that person is sitting there putting that idea into leaders. So you just need people around the people that make decisions even. It doesn't even have to be that person necessarily. And so Chamber of Commerce, Tourism Department, Downtown Association, City Council. Those are 4 different departments that their whole job is to make things happen in the city. So you can get them to champion you, and that's their flipping job, and that you don't have to pay them for. If you did, it'd be bribery. So you can't pay them. You can't do that. Physical stores and businesses, we talked about that earlier in restaurants. Corporations have more red tape, but they pay better. Small businesses, you could get designs approved faster, but they pay less. Grants. This is the other reason why you get the city or nonprofits to come help you. You can't always apply for grants because you're a for-profit business, but they can, and then they can pay you for doing that thing. And I had that with schools too. There was one computer lab that they're like, I have enough money for you if you can make it about technology, but I want it to be a desert landscape. So I built in circuit boards and icons into the mountain landscape because that fit the technology requirements. So you can get grants through schools, nonprofits. Another one, I paid for most of these ones on Main Street by doing big industries, the mines, the farms, the insurance companies. So they're and I would say big monopolies, electric companies, internet companies that were the only one, or water companies. They need to look good in the community, like they're helping. And so they're willing to throw money at you to be like, hey, make us look good. Hey, tell everybody about us, that we're not just some big corporation that you can't get away from, right? Airbnbs, they want good pictures for their, listing, schools, construction companies. I just had a friend do some for North Italia that got built, so they got to go and do murals with the construction company, only because they were hitting them up before the building was built. It could be part of the code and all that. And then you can go get sponsors for other events. But feel free to screenshot that or whatever, or write those down. Those are all places you can get something. I'm sure there's even more, but those are like the ones that I'm looking at currently. I hope that helps.
That's really cool,
Yeah.
Brant, that you're so willing to share your information too.
There's a lot of walls in the world.
Yeah. A lot of ugly walls, ugly downtowns.
Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Thanks,
That's awesome.
thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool to finally
I hope
meet you.
this helps somebody, because it definitely made my business take off after years of kind of being, stagnant financially.
Yeah. It's awesome.
I think too, like because I saw you in your latest YouTube video, you're working on a painting, and it's just a larger canvas in your studio there. I think too, that's sort of like in between the murals. If you're working on stuff like that, it's a pretty easy thing to.
This is the next one that I'm working on right here. Oh, let me zoom. Oh, I don't think I can zoom out.
That's so
Hold on.
cool.
Let me see.
He's got a large, maybe 3 foot by 3 foot painting of sort of a close up of a female wearing a Arizona jacket with a cool lightning bolt necklace and whatnot.
Yeah.
Nice lighting to it too. But I feel like that's a good. They go hand in hand. Your murals, your large canvases. So even if you're not getting mural work, you still have something to work on, something to show.
Okay, one more tip. If you're going to do a mural for a place that says Arizona or Safford or whatever, like the other way you could sell it is, I'm going to do this mural and I'm going to design it so it could be a t-shirt and so it could be a sticker. And so now the tourism department's like, oh, we can have stickers and t-shirts of that mural so people get stoked about our place. I've done that and people love them. So that stuff, Jake talked about in some video at some point, making money off of it 9 times. You can 100% do that with murals. Like, if anything, people are stoked about it. So that's another tip.
Well, I know.
I could do tips all day.
Yeah. You made stickers of some of your murals that you then gave me, and my kids saw those and they're like, oh, and now those stickers are on water bottles and little laptops and everything.
Yeah.
And it's just the perfect, I think, next step from that original art creation that you did. But
Yeah.
all right. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thanks, guys, for having me. I love this podcast.
Oh, thanks, Brant.
All right, I really appreciate Brant Woods for joining us today. I want to excuse Will. He had to leave. We went a little bit over his. He had a pre-scheduled thing, so I'm going to take us out solo here. But yeah, if you want to learn more about Brant, it's just search for Brant Woods. It's BRANDT Woods, and you're going to find him at Brant Woods on Instagram, on TikTok, anywhere you go. Cool style, cool guy. One of my big takeaways, again, and we talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but I love that he didn't just wait for an invitation or even for permission. He just went for it, with the murals, with coming up with a big grand idea that was seemed almost unaccomplishable, but it was a way to get people excited and interested in like his journey as an artist. So lots of big takeaways from this guy, and if you have any that really resonated with you, leave them in our YouTube comments at this video or at the bottom of this video. So with that, I just want to say SVSLearn, or 3-Point Perspective, is brought to you by SVSLearn, where becoming a great illustrator starts, and your hosts are Will Terry, Lee White, and Jake Parker. And I want to give a little shout out to our people who help make this podcast possible. I don't have my script up, so I'm like fumbling over words here. But podcast produced, I found it here. Podcast produced by Daniel 2. That's Daniel TU. Special thanks to Keeper of the Curriculum, Austin Shirtliff, Shownotes Wrangler, Lily Howell, Chief Operations Officer, Lisa Fott, our illustrator, Annalise Black. That's it for today. Now go draw something. All right. Do I just do banter with myself now? Hey, Jake, did you see that funny thing? Yeah. It was good.